All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our second webinar in our series of how to work in this environment right now. These are troubling times, challenging for everybody, as we all have to work from home and learn how to adapt to that, both as a manager and as an employee. You go from having your teams in the office and having common interactions all day long and being able to know what people are doing and up to, and your entire business changes from communication processes to tools and procedures and process management. How do you hunt down opportunities in this environment? So here today we have Dmitry Kosteryev, who is one of our senior project managers at Archer, Vladimir Tutov, who also is one of our senior project managers, and we're lucky to have Karen Krieglin joining us today. She is a change management expert, and we'll be talking about that very important side of communication and the emotional responses that people are going through right now as they're adjusting to not seeing their friends, not seeing their colleagues, not being able to have a place to go. You have all these distractions at home going on from kids and dogs and phones ringing, and you're on top of people. So it takes a lot from processes and procedures and communications and tools to really adjust to this environment. So to start off today, we're going to have Dmitry start to talk about business analysis and pivoting in times of crisis, and also talking about how to find opportunities in these times and how to survive in a downturn in the environment. So Dima.
Hello to everybody. Thanks for joining. And I want to talk about the analysis and the new ideas for crisis times for business at these difficult times, as Brian says. So how the current coronavirus pandemic affect business? Has the level of sales changed? How has the business reacted? And what we can do with business during this crisis? Also, the new business ideas, how you can rebuild your current business and keep it more or less safe, will be discussed during this part of our webinar. Now, it's very popular, the opinion, and we can hear this opinion, that economic downturn due to this pandemic and global economic crisis affected the business of fifth priority services. It means travel agencies, cinemas, hotels, entertainment centers, and other. But unfortunately, it's not at all. In this presentation, we used FinMap agency data and decided to test this hypothesis based on a survey of different industries on the effects for the business and possible actions in this new environment, in this crisis. In this survey involved next industries: trade, production, building, education, IT, HoReCa industry, it means hotels, restaurant, cafe, design, and architecture. So I want to show you the first slide. What impact does the pandemic have on business sales? So you can see from this slide that almost 79% of businesses identified losses and 8% decreasing in sales, and 30% have not yet felt the impact of the crisis.
What is it, Dima? What's the difference where you have two sides: identified losses and decreasing sales? Is there what's the difference between those two?
Oh no, sorry. 8% is it may be a small mistake because it's increasing sales. It's mistake here. It's not decreasing. 79% decreasing sales, of course. 8% is even increasing. I think it's we're talking about some producer for disinfection and maybe for medical masks. I don't know.
Sure.
And someone have no impact so far for that. So it's a little mistake. It's not decreasing. It means increasing sales even in this difficult situation.
Thank you.
Percent, how many percent reduction of sales? As you can see, almost 42% of respondents can see decrease in sales by 80 or even 100%. They have identified large losses. So we can see this picture from this slide. And the next slide, online versus offline, who lose more? It's very popular opinion that online will now break ahead, but the results of the survey showed something else. It's really very strange, but we are based on current available data. That 82% from 100% of online business owners have identified decrease compared to 70 and 80% for businesses that were presented in both channels, offline and online. Online also showed us the lowest percentage growth compared to others. It's 9% increase versus 14% for offline business and 30% for both channels. So I think here we can see the picture for food industry, and we can see the picture for medicine for increasing, of course. But if within the category, on average, sales decrease in trade for 60%, for design and architecture by 45%, for production by 73%, for construction by 80%, for education by 75%, and for IT by 32%, and for HoReCa branch for 84%. However, it is also important to consider that not only the share of the business affected by these events with pandemic, but also how much these events have affected on it. According to the results of the survey, online business has average decreasing in sales in 61%, and offline more than 80%. Those companies that were represented in both channels of 64%. This suggests that the most money lost offline without backup plan for such cases as happened today. So you can see the figures for industry here for decreasing. How did the pandemic affect the level of business sales by industry? It's one moment. Okay. And what the action does the business take in this situation? Almost a third of respondents choose the strategy of complete transition to online, as you can see from this slide. 20% noted the transition of employees to remote work. 11% indicated that they were forced to completely stop the work. Mostly among them are industries such as construction, building, beauty salons, HoReCa. Delivery service development for 8%, cost reduction 5%, decrease in the cost of goods and services 4%, cancellation of any events 4%, 4% trying to search for a new target audience, directing forces to do something that always did not have enough time. For example, analytics, strategic planning, education, it's 4%. 2% try to change the distribution channel, for example, placement of goods in supermarkets and the transfer of orders for the time at the end of quarantine. But we have no imagination when this time it comes. So what we can do in this crisis situation, I think that crisis situations are the best time for joining forces, support and accumulation of experience. From this slide, you can see a list of tips that can be used in this crisis situation. Keep calm and do not stop. Look for other distribution channels. Cost saving. Use time to implement ideas that have always been set for later, including strategic planning and education. Stay in the exit zone for your customer. Communicate with him. If possible, reduce the production of product. So it's very simple things that you can do in this crisis situation, in this uncertainty time. And here is the steps how we can minimize effects of the crisis. You can do following steps as presented on this slide. Pessimistic forecast. Draw the most pessimistic scenario for the income of your company, and based on it, you can plan your spending. Cost saving. Pay particular attention to fixed cost. For example, the current situation is the time to try remote work for yourself and at the same time reduce the fixed cost for renting an office. Schedule a payment calendar weekly. This step will save you from the cash gap when, for example, you already need to pay a salary in your company, but there is nothing because untimely payment to you from a third-party supplier and third-party customer. Think before you make a big purchases. We return to point 1 in this list and looking at the scenario, we take into account of possible risks. We ask ourselves, how much does the company need these expenses now? You can also try to do some experiment, but you must be very careful. A time of crisis often makes us more flexible and adapt to this situation. Now, as you can see, offline goes online, and the restaurant business is developing delivery. Production adapts their products to current demand. So you can provide a lot of experiments, but you must be very careful with it because you have no chances to another second chances to make a mistake. So here you can see.
Let me ask you a question on the other slide. Do you feel this is a very unique situation we're in right now, where people were very quickly forced to switch their online to offline, where they were very quickly forced to go from working in person to working remotely? We've gone through other disasters, if you want to call it. We had the 2008 financial crisis where things crashed, but people weren't forced to work from home. So this is unique. In terms of minimizing the crisis here, which parts of these, given that we were forced to work from home and all of that, some of these are a little more important right now, right? Perhaps, or would you say they all are equal in any given crisis?
Very interesting. I think all these points is very important, but first of all, you must think about cost saving and then you experiment and new products for market. I think it's a good time for possibility, and you need to analyze your business, what you can present for the market and how you can cut the costs here. It's most of important things. As I told you about the examples, you can cut off the rent of the office and so on, so on. So you must analyze and you must thinking about the new possibility for your business, and maybe most of your forces can be used for building online. If it's of course it's possible for a business, because not all types of business can be presented online, unfortunately. So we also need to know. If you are beauty service, it's impossible to make a beauty services online, unfortunately.
Maybe you can do a video, tell a barbershop. You can cut your hair, show people how to cut in real time. Thinking outside the box, right?
You can use special application, AR application, and you can imagine how your face looks like after the cosmetic procedure, for example. Okay, so.
Thanks.
So I can continue. So on this slide, I want to talk about the strategies and tactics of moving your business to online. It's just a very short things, because in future these changes will only strengthen the business. The only important rule here is to analyze before implementation, as we are talking already about it, and predict the ROI of the investment if you are ready to make such investment. Yes, it will take more time, but it's better to spend it now than even more in the future. With the COVID-19 outbreak, businesses have been forced to offer products and services online as solution to the problems which already happens with business. Due to this current situation, business owners can still see a light at the end of the tunnel because people are always looking for ways and try to get what they need. Clearly, business sense demand in the market. Those with strategic to invest will be able to redefine the market by moving online. However, businesses that are not addressing current needs could be in for some pain. If you are not ready for the online shift, here is a great opportunity to step forward and make it happen. As we know now, we are living in the world of digitalization, and the buying behavior of the customer also changing. That make it essential for the businesses to go online to access more customer and increase their visibility in the market. I want to share with you some of the most essential tips to move your business online. It's just a short list. I think that separate webinar may be needed for that, for description of all these points. So you can do the marketing research, build your own website, keep it simple, very simple, KISS principle, develop a plan for maintenance, don't skimp on the payment processor, get inspiration from leaders, keep products and prices aligned, develop a return and refund strategy, don't undersell yourself, explore the possibility of social media, choose one good platform, try an existing platform first, use existing tools, be ready to scale, create responsive website and mobile version, of course, also. Develop an email distribution list, look for some niche marketplace, spend on advertisement, and keep your eye on ROI. I have shared with you some of the most effective tips to shift your business offline, to shift your offline business to online. In this modern era, in this difficult situation, being online is essential for every business who wants to access maximum customer. You have to make good marketing research to effectively make a plan and go for the business. So it can be said that the online world is full of internet business opportunities that can be indicator of success for any business. And now it's a good chance to realize such opportunities for your own business. I want to share several examples how it looks like in this modern era and this situation with crisis. My friend is a shoe manufacturer. Shoes production moved from the plant for 30 employees to home work. And the parts from the shoes, different parts of the shoes, is distributed between different employees by transport right now. It's a little bit strange, but it's the same business model from which this business was started 80 years ago. But now in this situation, the main difference, it's fully controlled by the same instruments as for real production. They can use online production system and online warehouse. And also he's thinking about new online services for customers, and also some delivery will be soon also developed. Thinking about delivery. Next one, from production, from food production example. It's a meat processing plant. They're thinking about investment in a high-tech equipment, which allows cutting meat without participation of people. This is a high price investment, but in the face of possible risk of product contamination, This investment will help to avoid the risk of closure of this plant by staying out of specialists who can be ill, and also by passing the human factor that they have not left before and reducing labor costs. This process can also be monitored online for production management. Next one. It's also very simple examples. Virtual events and concerts are already held and quite popular. You can use 3D and AR technologies, and it can make this process more realistic. Video consulting in various fields. For example, in medicine, device can be also used that allows you to remotely report work from home.
Work from home.
At
least we're all in the same boat with the same things going on. So that's something good for everyone to recognize.
So video consulting and telehealth, as they're talking, in various fields. In medicine, devices can be used that allow you to remotely report of the main parameters for patients, its pressure, pulse, temperature, and so on. Next one, it's a distant education in virtual classroom, also with using AR technologies. Next one, HoReCa. Very difficult times for HoReCa right now. I think it's a good time for a new class of vending machines and maybe some cafes and restaurants without waiters. For example, restaurants in Czech Republic and where the orders are delivered to customer by small toy train, toy rail. So such principles can be used also for organization for next level HoReCa, for next level restaurants and cafes. So I would like to end this review with a quote. It will not always be like this. You can get the new experience. Life does not stop. Now we are checking how much someone needs your products and how it changes people's lives. Crisis, it's a time for possibility. Let your ideas live. So it's all from my side. I'm waiting for questions, or maybe we can do it at the end of our webinar.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You know, in the couple slides back, you had a bunch of different things that people can do, and they seem to require a lot of various skill sets, a lot of various experience, and a lot of differing expertise, from marketing and advertising to go back right here. So these require a lot of different skill sets to be able to adapt and implement these strategies. Heck, even to create these strategies, if you haven't done it before, where is it realistic to expect that any company can make those adaptations, make those leaps, and have that they have that knowledge base internally? Or is now a good time to look for third-party experts to help you, be it a consultant or be it a team who has that experience and expertise in these various areas? What do you think?
I think yes, of course, because if you are just, for example, owner of meat plant and you are thinking about for increasing of your sales and you need to go online, you can't build a website, you can't build effective strategy, business analysis, consulting, effective developments, everything needed here. So without it, you can't be successful here on the market. And our team as IT professionals can provide all kinds of services for our customer in such way, starting even from simple business idea, how you can organize and what you can build online, and also we can finish with development of the complete business plan and implementation of your services. And as I told you, we can let your ideas live.
Right, sure. Great. Does anybody on the call have any questions for Dima at this moment before we move on to our next presenter?
Yes. Hello, my name is Bohdan.
Hello.
I'm from UTeam. Thank you guys for this presentation. I'm very interested, where do you get this data from? Do you have like an open source resource for that?
It was open source data, as I told you, if you're talking this data, yes?
Yeah, all these numbers.
It's from agency, one moment, it's from agency, it was found in the web, FinMap agency. FinMap agency, more than 1,000 of different businesses was involved here for this survey, and they present this data. It's as open source data in internet in some articles, so we can also present it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe it will be some differences from one region to another region of the world, but we can see some overall picture.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
No, thanks for the question.
Any other questions online? All right, great. Damon, that was excellent. Thank you so much. We're going to move on now to Karen, who, like I mentioned in the beginning, Karen is a change management expert, and she's going to be talking about overcoming the differences in culture, language, and time. Obviously, this is a very emotional time for people. You're locked in your houses. Again, you're not with your friends. You're not socializing. You're dealing with the anxieties and the stress of what's going on in the world. And we have to keep businesses going. We have to overcome, some certain challenges that were maybe not otherwise presented before. So Karen, you're up.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone can see my screen. This is actually one of my first times using Zoom screen sharing. So please do shout if
Good.
there's also if sound is let's say disappearing for some reason.
Nope.
So first of all, thank you to the Archer team for inviting me. As Brian said, I'm an external person who's been invited to share some experience today. And no matter whether we are talking the current situation where Corona is having quite a significant impact on all of us, or we are talking in an everyday distributed team, cross-border cooperation situation, it all boils down to communication. And let me see, here we go. I would like to share this quote with you to start with. It's a bit of a tongue twister, and actually for quite a few sources are attributing this to Alan Greenspan, but we are actually talking about Robert McCloskey, who was a spokesperson back in the 60s and the 70s in the US. And what I want to illustrate with this quote is that we are making some very common mistakes when we're talking about communication. We very often act on assumptions, guilty as charged, and also quite often you can get into situations where you think you have expressed yourself clearly, but the reaction that you are getting from the recipient doesn't really correspond to what you were expecting. And in those cases, it's very, very important not to start pointing fingers immediately at the recipient, but actually also look in the mirror as for what you are doing yourself. But to put a little bit of a context into or around who I am and what I do, I'm originally from Denmark, but I've been living in Ukraine since 2007. I started learning Russian back in the late 80s, so I would say it's fair to say I have more than 20 to 25 years of experience working with Eastern Europe. As I said, I've been living in Ukraine for what's now 13 years, and I would say one revolution and 5 presidents, and I'm happy to call Ukraine my home. I'm usually doing these kind of things in Russian, actually. So this is also a new experience doing it in English. But I've been around the block, I guess you could say, because in Ukraine I've mainly worked in IT, but in Denmark and Australia I worked in agriculture, and I've also worked in the legal business, so and also a short stint in FMCG in Mongolia. So I have a fairly wide basis for bringing to you today some tips and tricks and some pitfalls that I would recommend you to try to avoid.
And it sounds like you have a lot of good experience with the cultural differences too across those various regions that you've done business in.
I definitely had a funny experience in Mongolia where I thought, okay, I've been working with Russia for so many years. At the time, this is like 15 years ago, that I thought, okay, I can easily adapt and figure out how to do things and work with Mongolians. No such thing. So please, yeah, never think you've learned it all. There will always be something more to learn, always be room for improvement. I think that's my main advice to anyone who thinks they're an expert.
Especially going into a new into a new culture, into a new country.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if we look at communication dimensions, I know from a tech audience or let's say an IT audience, communication, it's mainly, you would expect it to be around features, around what should be developed, where do we want to go, and so on and so forth. However, if you look at it from a, let's say, humanistic viewpoint, and we look into what are actually the communication dimensions that are underlying everything you say and everything you do towards a recipient, then you actually get quite a lot of different dimensions. This is only a few of them, and I would say it's hard to navigate if you are not, let's say, immediately considering what should be important and what is not important. However, in order to make it a little bit more simpler for you guys, I have defined what I believe are the 3 most important dimensions that you should be looking at. So you need to start with the who. Who's your audience? Who is it that you're communicating to? Then you have to define or determine the what. What is it you want to achieve? What is the purpose of whatever it is that you are saying, or whatever it is that you want to get to when you are communicating? And then obviously the how. What is the channel? And obviously in these times where a lot of companies have switched to everything done remotely, that becomes quite pivotal in order to make communication flow at least to as high efficient state as it was before. So if we start with the first one, defining the audience. Stakeholders is let's say the broad term for audience in this context at least, and any stakeholder, you are always looking at 2 different, let's say, angles. One is, what is the influence that the person that you're communicating with has on your project or on the task that you're sitting with, or the context you are in at the moment. And the second one is the impact that this stakeholder has on your project. Because if you are talking to someone who has a major influence, it could be, let's say, a product owner, and you have something that you would like to get through, you think you've come up with the great feature, and this is just what would really make it for that product when you go to market, then obviously you need to phrase this in a way so that you get the buy-in from the product owner. Vice versa, if you have, let's say, a QA tester who's constantly being, pushed for, you need to make this faster, it needs to be, it can't take that long, speaking from experience, then it has to be communicated in a way so that the QA tester can, let's say, make his case. Again, depending on who he's talking to and what he wants, what is the message, as we said, as we're talking about later on, what is the message that he wants to get through? That you are pushing me too hard, or that it's just not doable, or we are doing the wrong thing. It all boils down to what is the content that you want to put into your message in order to get it through, but obviously also frequency. I have seen various suggestions, as I'm sure you've also seen. There's a lot of webinars going on right now, and a lot of advice on, doing a 10-minute every morning video call. Everyone says, hi, have a morning coffee. If that is what works for people, go ahead. It's about creating as normal a environment as possible. But again, it is, what is it that you want to who is it that you're talking to, and who is it that you're communicating with?
Karen, so you're saying trying to maintain a lot of the same environment that's going on. So you're saying if you have a regular, a quick 5-minute company meeting every morning at 10 a.m., try to maintain that as you shift to online? Absolutely.
It's basically taking your, let's say, your offline life online. In these days, switching on the video, we all sitting cooped up at home. You don't, hopefully you don't see too many people out in the street, as we're all supposed to stay at home. So switching on the video, seeing people, putting a face to the name, putting a face to the voice, and just really try to create that rapport, create that
morale, corporate culture.
The feeling of being in the same room. Right. I think that is also, if you're talking in a distributed team situation, if you are used to, let's say, going across the hallway to talk to your colleague, well, it doesn't really matter whether you're in Seattle or you're in Kiev. Okay, time difference, of course, is a bit of an obstacle. So, but then for some it will be the morning coffee, and for the other it would be the evening cup of tea, right?
Which would be the same anyway.
Yeah, it would. So you really need to sort of keep that focus on touching base.
Sure.
And of course, you could say, if you have well, as in my case, I had a back-end team sitting in Ukraine and a front-end team sitting in Denmark. Well, the ideal scenario would have been to have a morning, let's say, sync up where we were doing it, everything was done online. Well, we had it as a weekly touch base call. And from a communication perspective, what I did was, for the Ukrainian team, that became, let's say, I think I called it can't even remember what I called it right now, actually, but I used one of the technology terms, whereas for the Danish team, it was just a sync up. And I remember very vividly the first comment I got after the first meeting, because one of the oldest developers in the Danish team, well, it didn't even hurt. So it was really breaking down a barrier in order to, syncing up on a weekly basis. It's probably for the better. And now I'm not going to go into methodology and processes, that will be much more about later. But it's really about treating your distributed team colleagues as if they were sitting across the hallway.
Sure. I have another question for you. So on this chart, you have in some specific buy-in and commitment. On our last webinar, we were talking about the importance of empowering your employees now to take even more ownership in that project that they're working on. They're working solo rather, they're alone. You can't pop in their office as much. You don't want to interrupt their flow. You want to keep that sense of purpose, the goals still very much highlighted and everybody on the same page. But we talked about empowering your employees and giving them ownership in that which they're tasked for, and how that can help right now even much more so than if you're working in an office, if you're working remotely.
Mm-hmm.
Any of that where you have the buy-in and the commitment, giving your employees a little more ownership in that which way they're doing right now, that commitment and that buy-in?
Well, I think it's the key word here for me would be structure. It would be to have a clear expectation, not cast in stone, but almost, basically agreeing on what is the box, let's say, the box that the manager says to his employee, this is the box within which you have free reign. As long as you hit that deadline and you hit, the product will look something like this, then keep me in the loop. And then having a regular touch base, which should be scheduled. It shouldn't be too much, if you have a question, just ping me. Because again, if you do that, then you will get in conflict with the cultural barriers. What I have seen in my experience with my employees here in Ukraine over the years has been that unless you go and ask people, they will not always come to you and tell you what was the problem. Eventually, they got, let's say, used to the fact that they might as well come and tell me so I could help them fix the issues if there were any. So I would really recommend, it's about setting clear expectations and then letting people go off and do their thing, but constantly just saying, is there anything I can do for you? Is there anything I can help you with? Because it shouldn't be that an employee feels he is constantly being poked, or what is your progress? How much have you gotten? How much percent is done? And having this, it's really, I would say, this kind of servant leadership approach that should be applied in order to maximize the impact of empowerment.
Sure, very delicate dance. And let's face it, if you're going to be micromanaging, you're not going to be successful in switching to managing distributed teams. You have to let a lot of that go. You have to empower your employees and let them do their work without feeling like you're constantly checking in on them. And that can be a very tricky thing, to a fine line to dance between making sure that they're doing their work, making sure that they're motivated, not overly checking in on them.
Yeah. But I think still it is possible. It's all in the wording. It's all in how you ask.
Sure.
It is like, what is the status? How far have you got? As opposed to, are there any obstacles right now that I can help you remove? So sure. It's all in the angle. If you're coming with, as a manager, if you're coming with a helping attitude, so it takes time, because you need to, it's a trust relation. That is the basis of everything. But it really has to, if you're coming with the right wording, if you're coming with the right approach, then, and of course, as you were also correctly saying, Brian, it's about letting go of this, let's say, our inner instinct to control things.
Sure.
That is a difficult part, but it comes with when you start trusting people. I think it was, can't remember who said it, but the best thing to how to figure out if you can trust people is to start trusting them, and then see when it fails.
Sure. And trust goes both ways here, right? From your manager to your employee, and from your employee to your manager. You have to have that trust that your manager is looking out for your best interests and going to help you. And, psychologists often say that people who are not used to working at home and suddenly have to switch to working at home are less likely to talk about their issues or their stumbling blocks in a project, are less likely to reach out to their manager. They feel some kind of sense of discomfort, and are less likely to communicate any issues that they're having. So very important to open up, keep that dialogue open, and keep them comfortable to come to you.
Yeah. And as a manager, be proactive, go and ask if there's anything. Don't wait for your employees to come and tell you.
Too late at that point.
Then it is usually too late, yeah.
Thank you, Karen.
All right. The second part is, what is the purpose? What is it that you, in the communication situation, now we've talked about who are you talking to. Now the second part is, what is it you want to achieve? So again, coming back to, let's say, my example of the product owner, if you want to inform the product owner about a great idea that you have, then you need to let's say, phrase it in one way. If you want to, let's say, inquire what is the roadmap going forward, you're phrasing it in a different way. So again, this is a way to illustrate, really, before you start the communication, let's say the email, for instance, or the newsletter or whatever, then try to put yourself in the recipient's shoes and say, what is it that I would like the recipient to give me back? So what is the goal? What is it that I want to get from the recipient? That is, in essence, your purpose. And that would be the underlying thinking that should be, let's say, going through whatever message it is that you're sending.
Sure, and you have to take into account the tone of the message. If you're writing a text or an IM versus a phone call or an email, you write a quick text and it can come off short and curt and rude when it wasn't. It's just a quick question.
Yeah. And personally, I have a tendency, I'm very happy for using bullet points and numbering because that helps me structure my thoughts. I do have a reputation for being quite straightforward. Maybe it's my Danish heritage, I don't know. But what I have observed is that for, in particular, tech-savvy people, that is actually nice for them, because it's like, okay, it's pretty straightforward. You can sometimes, of course, you have to be careful if you want a yes or no answer, or you asking an open question. Again, coming back to what is it you want to achieve. But it's very important to, let's say, still let yourself shine through the message. You can say the same thing in two different ways, or many different ways. And in a cultural context, I would say, if you are in doubt, then write the email and then follow up with a call. And I would even say it becomes even more necessary if you are new to distributed teams, because let's say a Ukrainian communicates with an American okay, now we're using English, but let's say it would be a third language. For instance, right now I'm speaking English, which is not my native language. I can also misunderstand English if I'm talking to a Ukrainian. So if you can imagine a Ukrainian and a Dane communicating in English, things will go wrong at some point.
That sounds like a joke.
Well, I actually had a situation last summer where it was a Dane I was communicating with, and we were two Danes communicating in English, and we had a Filipino have to step in and translate between us because we misunderstood each other. So, you know, it's all about, you know, are you, when you get a message, are you actually translating it correctly in your head? So when I think that I'm communicating 100% clearly, which I'm not, I'm never, no one communicates 100% clearly. We are still, let's say, maybe expressing only 50%, because the remaining 50% are in our minds. So if you imagine, if I get the message from someone where it's actually only 50%, then I interpret that. Best case scenario is that I'll get 75% of the message. So you can do the math, right? So when I respond back and like, okay, that was not exactly what I wanted to achieve. You know, the Hans Christian Andersen has this fairy tale of one feather that turned into 5 hens. It can very often happen, but the best thing you can do not act on assumptions. Right. Don't believe that you got it right. Just ask.
Ask questions.
Ask questions, exactly. And that leads to the optimal channel. Like, what is it? Like, again, for people and companies that have been thrown in on the deep end, going remote communication these days, is it calls? Is it emails? Is it some newsletters? It all depends on what it is that you are talking about. Is it something complex? Always face-to-face, well, video, I guess it would be in these days. But the all-encompassing thing around here is structure. The key word is structure. From my own experience, you know, again, it's easy to say, just ping me if you have a question. But if your recipient isn't necessarily trusting you to, I don't take you seriously, to have enough time to talk to you, or for whatever reason, he won't ping you. So he will probably, or she for that matter, will sit and dig herself or dig himself into the problem and trying to solve it. Time is going, deadline is coming closer. You know, the manager is not hearing anything, so you think everything is hunky-dory. And then comes, let's say, 24 hours before deadline, and you figure out, shit, we're actually very far from reaching the target here. Now, who's the guilty one? Was it the manager not checking in, acting on and thinking everything was perfectly fine? Or was it the employee who were just trying his or her best to make everything work? I would say 50-50. They're both guilty.
I would agree.
It's so my point is, be careful pointing fingers at others if you're not getting the response you were expecting, because if you point a finger at someone, there are three fingers pointing at you. That's a very good rule that I very often use myself.
And the finger pointing escalates very quickly.
It does. It does. So communication, we think we are talking and everything is going great, but of course we run into conflict. Obstacles, they are bound to appear. So these are my, let's say, very simple tricks and recommendations if you have a conflict. And I would even say, this is not just a distributed team. This is not just cross-cultural. This is really basic in any situation where you would have a communication conflict, or you have some expectations that are not being met. So really, I'm pretty old school, so I'm a very big fan of actually calling and talking to people. I have worked in organizations and with organizations where, I don't know, I guess email tyranny is the best word I can come up with. I'm pretty sure many of you have overflowing inboxes. But again, pick up the phone, call them, and then if necessary, if you feel that it's relevant, then drop an email afterwards. This is what I believe we agreed on. If not, if something is incorrect, let me know. And if they don't respond, means you got it right. So that's your evidence.
There you go. I have a question for you. This approach of message, audience, channel, trying to adapt, trying to look at the best ways to handle your routine communications, if you will. How do you master those skills? What kind of effort and practice can you put into it so that you don't have to really think about each communication that you're sending out and putting that much effort into every interaction that you're having?
There's no easy way. It comes from experience. For me, actually, I think this slide might actually answer your question, because it's about being mindful of yourself. I would say, just if you are in a situation where you didn't get the result or didn't get the response that you were expecting, then spend 5 seconds reflecting. The world is running really, really fast, and even more so these days. But it is really about taking those 5 seconds time out and just say, okay, hang on, what happened here? Okay, it was me actually wrote in the, okay, now I get why she responded like that. So by taking those 5 seconds of mindfulness in not just in a conflict situation, but in any situation where you are getting a different result from your communication that you anticipated, then little by little you will build the experience of just autopilot switching on your emotional intelligence when it comes to communication. That there is no easy way.
Learning to act, not react. Take a moment. People hear what they want to hear. They see what they want to see. They perceive a negative tone in the message when there wasn't any. It was just your manager has 100 things going on at once and shoots you a quick note, and you're like, oh my gosh, blah, 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 blah. So you start to think outside, but remain calm, communicate. And don't assume the worst.
Yeah. For me, really, the first one, listen to understand, not just to answer. That is really my best advice I can give to anyone, because it might be that he got out of bed in the wrong way in the morning. He had kids were running around screaming, wife was unhappy, and it's not really you who's the issue. It was just when you came and asked, can I have a day off? That was the
circumstantial.
Yeah. So really just, chill, take it easy.
Excellent.
So that's it from my side. Any questions? Now, as I'm full screen, I can't see if anyone has written anything in the chat, but please do shoot at me. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Excellent. Well, We'll see if we do have any that come up. We can always come back to it too.
Absolutely.
Karen, thank you so much for that. That was great, great insights and great advice. Definitely appreciate your thoughts and comments. So now we're going to switch over to Vladimir. Vlad is going to talk about what you do now in terms of setting up those processes and those routines and infrastructure for remote work. Something as simple as making sure that people can have headphones in their at home and things like that, to much more complex things. So Vlad, you're up.
Yeah, hello everyone. Brian, thank you for the intro. Just a couple of words about myself. I'm in IT like around 15 years right now, and last 7 or 8 years I'm here as a manager, product and project manager, and right now we work in ArcherSoftware. We work mostly with distributed team, and basically most part of these teams are remote. So yeah, this is something that I will talk about. Yeah, now we will start with optimization and cost effectiveness first of all. So the presentation is quite short, and Brian, please feel free to interrupt me and jump in for the questions. Yeah, so when it comes like the crisis is like the current one, everyone tries to be slim in expenses and tries to optimize the cost to basically survive and for sake of the business, first of all. And here for the cost effectiveness, of course, we first of all talking about some spend optimizations on operational basis for the entire business. But cost effectiveness should be also on a project level. So when it goes down to the project level, we can see two main parts to optimize the cost. First of all, this is optimizing the process, development process itself, and this is a pretty essential one because we need to do things, and we need to do the things really like in a the best way that we can, and with fewer expenses. So here, basically, when we're trying to optimize the process, our intuition tells that everyone needs to get busy, and everyone needs to have something to do right now, and every single moment. But the reality shows us that it's not the optimal way for the entire process, for the entire team to work. And the most optimal way was basically introduced as a theory, critical chain theory by Goldratt, Eliyahu Goldratt, in his theory of constraints. So he tells that we need to find in the entire chain, in the entire process, we need to find the node that is most loaded one, and we need to optimize process there. Not try to push everyone do something every moment, but just unload the most critical node, and optimize entire chain just one by one, unloading the most critical parts. So when we will optimize one node, another one will become critical. So we need to go there and see how we can optimize this part. As example, here in software development, we have pretty straightforward flow. When some task is analyzed and described by product owner, then it goes to development, and developers execute on it, basically write some piece of software, and then it goes to QA, where QA engineers are checking that everything works according to the specification, and so on and so forth. So if we would try to load everyone 100% every moment, we will get our system breaking really maybe every week, because somebody will fail, like development will take longer, and QA cannot get new tasks. So we need to basically we need to see who is doing most part of the work right now, and we need to unload this this node. And after that, we need to make sure that everyone in this chain will do his job, but will have some buffer just for the case if something goes wrong. So the entire process will not be like interrupted. So this is the first part. And of course, we need to go to every single person from time to time and check in if he has some issues, if he has some questions. So yeah, as it was said previously, too few people will go by themselves to the manager and will tell that I have a question, or I'm stuck on something. So yeah, we need to go and do check-in from time to time on a regular basis. So for these check-ins, we need to see not only what person is doing, but we need to try to find out how the person does the work. Like try to minimize all the distractions, try to optimize communication between people, between the team members, and reduce everything that is not productive for people. So we need to like clean, try to clean time of our team members and to set them for success this way.
Vlad, I have a question for you here. If you could just go back real quick. You say when you talk about reducing time and participants of the meetings, if you have a regular in-person staff meeting, let's say twice a week, and you have 25 participants in a room, you're able to manage those conversations, right? People are raising their hands or what have you, however you manage people going back and forth. When you're online, and we saw this before, 2 people start talking, 3 people start talking, nobody's hearing anybody else. Do you think it would be better, as you say, keep the participants, reduce the participants? Is it better to have smaller meetings online, and since so you don't have everybody trying to chime in and talk over each other and things like that?
Yeah, so right now we have these times we need to have some meetings or parts of the meetings for everyone to socialize. But speaking about some meetings that are should be productive and should resolve some questions, we see in a lot of places and a lot of companies that for the meetings, we have big lists of attendance, 25, 30 people, but just a couple of them might really answer the questions, and really a couple of them might decide something. And this is just counterproductive, and it's just waste of time. And people don't like such meetings. And basically, people don't like to attend lots of meetings where they are bored, they cannot do nothing, can do nothing about topic of the meeting, but still, for some reasons, invited to attend the meeting. So we need to keep attendance list as slim as possible, and basically try to invite just 3-4 people. So people on the meeting will really do something and not just sit and spend the time. And there is like pizza rule. So if you cannot, probably 2 pizzas, yeah. So if for the meetings 2 pizzas are not enough to feed all the attendance, you have too many attendance on the meeting. So try to have some metrics there.
And part process and part communication. I know I used to take part in one of the companies I worked for, Undertone. We would have once a week a meeting with about 50 people in the conference room, a few people dialed in. It was a big waste of time, but that's a different story. However, in that scenario, the people who were sitting in the conference room were able to raise their hands or speak up and talk, and we would save certain sections to say, anybody online have any comments now, so that the people who were remote had that opportunity to speak up. If you have a regular meeting with your team where everybody's used to just chiming in, and now you switch to online, you have to implement some other processes in terms of everybody hold your questions until we ask, or things like that, so the meetings don't go to mayhem. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, so the processes are a bit different in terms of tools that we're using, and basically in terms of organizing the workspace and all this supplementary stuff. But right now, as I can see, we are trying to mimic the real environment. So we're trying to see everyone here using video conferences, and we really from time to time even work with video conference turned on for like couple of hours. Entire team works when while being in a conference with video turned on, and some spontaneous talks going on the same way as in real room. So we really with all these tools, we really trying to mimic the our offline environment, I would say. But right now we have too few tools to use, and I think that this will be better eventually, and amount of tools and probably new approaches to work online will appear. But right now we have just really couple of tools to do so. So yeah, basically nothing really really different from the offline work, but just tools to mimic the one.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so moving forward, basically, yeah, the second part here. So while optimizing the process and having the process that is that works really well and smoothly, we still need to make sure that we are doing right things in a correct way. Because having really good process, but doing something really not productive and moving towards wrong goals, we will not bring us success. So the second part is to optimize the scope, and right now, really good approach is to mimic how startups work here, because startups typically have very limited money funds, and they essentially need to do everything as cost effective as possible just to survive. And there are a couple of standard approaches for the startups nowadays. One of them is lean startup, and basically lean startup says that we need to we need to cut everything from the product that is not that is not really required, and we need to deliver the product to the market as soon as possible. So basically, we need to cut all bells and whistles from the beginning, and just deliver bare minimum to the market and test our ideas. So we basically each feature is presented as idea that this feature will really help our customers, help business to grow, will bring more money or more value for the business. And we need to validate each idea one by one, and not do everything for a long time quietly and then deliver to the market big scope and see that market needs something else. But we need to implement the ideas really one by one, and test, see that each idea works. And only after that, we need to add some like gold plating to the ideas and some nice interfaces and so on and so forth. So basically, for this, the startup, each moment of the time, it should implement the most critical tasks. And if funding will be over, if funding will be interrupted, each moment of time, we need to make sure that we deliver it just everything that is really needed. And we didn't do some really gold plating before implementing important features. Yeah. So and then for like grown business, when startup goes to grown phase, we need to introduce metrics, and basically each idea is still validated, but validated by the metrics. because for the startup, for the beginning, we do not have too many metrics. But for grown business, we typically have really dashboard with lots of metrics, and we need to lean towards metrics and not do something based on our gut feelings. Yeah. So for people, basically, when we switching from offline mode to the online mode, as managers, we need to have some checklist what to do and what to check to make sure that business works, and to make sure that everyone can do his job in full extent. So for this, we need first of all to make sure that equipment really provided for all the people. Basically, in software development, it's quite easy right now because we mostly work with our laptops and with headphones, and that's enough. But for some other industries, it might be really tricky and challenging. But still, for the business to survive, we need to make sure beforehand that equipment and all like supplies are provided and delivered to people. Then we need to move to online mode all parts of our process. So again, in software development, we typically work with a distributed team, and we already have most of parts going online. So for tasks, we need to have some online task tracking system, issue tracking system, and there are a lot of different tools on the market right now. Starting with Jira, which is really industry standard, I would say. But this is quite huge thing and quite complex, especially for less technical people. So it might be challenging to work with Jira, but luckily we have more like simple tools. And when the process doesn't need such complex tool as Jira, the one can use others like Trello or Asana or any other tools. We really have like at least dozen of those on the market right now. So.
Do you think there are tools more important for a smaller company versus a bigger company? If you have 10 people that you're now managing remotely versus you have a team of 100, are there different systems that are more important to those different size companies to implement right away? And again, in this environment, it was very quick that we had to switch from in-person to digital. And so implementing certain systems all at once can be very overwhelming. Where would you say a company should start in making sure that their digital processes and tools and systems are in place? Do you start with communication? Do you start with a tracking system? Do you start with a knowledge database? Are there any levels of priority for those various systems depending on the size?
Well, first of all, yeah, if you asking about priorities of different systems, like to start, whether to start with issue tracking and then introduce some online whiteboards. So I wouldn't say that there is some clear priority, but it really depends on the process. Some things you need to get anyway. So you need to have some issue tracking system. I don't know, it might be as simple as Google spreadsheet with the tasks and with checklist, but you really need to have the one. Also, you need to use messengers and some software for calls, for video calls, for audio calls, doesn't matter. But this is something that you cannot live without. And then all other tools like whiteboard or I don't know, some knowledge-based systems are not that important, but for some of the process, they might be really needed. So in general, I would say that those are in second priority. And also, I think most of the tools we already use on a daily basis, even in our everyday life, not only for the job, because we already watch conferences online. We already use, I don't know, dozen of or 5 at least messengers, different messengers, and I think all of us use some Google Docs or other system to have our documents
Sharing.
online. Yeah, so basically part of this we already using. Yeah.
Another question for you too, and taking one step back, you were talking about metrics before as well.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of metrics? What are the important metrics to consider as you're moving from a startup to a more mature company, as you're growing? What metrics do you need to really think about and stay focused on?
Well, there are few different approaches around the metrics, and first of all, we need to focus on really like how to call it, metrics that are real. And one of the issues with metrics that we can overlook something based on fake metrics. So if we would add a feature and we would see growth of the audience after adding some feature to the software, it might be connected to really different, different things. It might be some I don't know, so something happening on a market, and then the audience is changed, and not because of our feature added. So we need to see for each of the product, we need to find its own metrics, and we need to find metrics that are real. So for, of course, essential metrics are money, the money that business gets, and essential metrics are basic ones as amount of customers and some retention period, and so on and so forth. So we have some basic ones, but for each business, we need to find out which metrics work really for this business. So
you think it's more specific to the business, the industry, and the product, as opposed to the size of the company, that is more important in the metrics?
Yeah. So for really small companies, not small, but for companies that just in the beginning of their way, there are just a couple of metrics matter. But for as the business grows, we adding more and more metrics and numbers there, and yeah, it is really specific for the business.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so going back to the roadmap and to the checklist, after we made sure that the process is really migrated to online, we need to check that the infrastructure also work, and infrastructure also working online. Basically, again, for software development, it is quite easy to move everything to the cloud. So here in Archer, we have, I think, all our tools already online, and we do not really need some office as a building, as a space for that. But for some businesses, it might be really challenging. But yeah, it was interesting to see and hear the example of this shoe factory going to work from home mode. And yeah, but this is quite challenging to implement something like this with really offline businesses. But still, we need to think how to migrate all the parts of the infrastructure to online, or how to distribute these parts and to work from home mode. And basically, while moving everything to online, we need to make sure that permissions for newly set up tools are really in place, because this happens quite often when we start the project. We start the project with some new client, and especially when the project, some parts of the projects are already going for the client. We try to get all required permissions and access to all tools, and we spent a couple of days of the entire team just to get the permissions, especially when the client is big corporation. So it might be really challenging. So all the permissions should be provided beforehand to not waste time.
Such a simple thing, but could create such problems for a company that if you're working in different time zones and you're waiting, you don't have permission for a document, and now that person is home or asleep, and you lose your whole day not being able to get in. So something so simple that can affect the business.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is really small and stupid thing, but this might be a blocker for the entire team.
Sure.
Yeah, and when we talking about team working remotely, basically not only the tools, but we need to make sure that the process after migrating to online process really works and works correctly. So we need to make sure that all team members started using some issue tracking software, so everyone on daily basis see his tasks and put some comments there, and we need to provide clear tasks for all the people, because some of the people do not used to work from home, and they might be a bit lost without some clear agenda and clear tasks. So while in the office, they can just go to the manager and ask, but working remotely and especially working from home, when manager might be, I don't know, on some meeting or some really might be offline for some reasons. Again, they can spend a lot of time without doing anything. So this is essential thing, but yeah, this is really something need to be first of all in our heads. And we like while working in the office, we try to decrease number of meetings, number of all communications. But right now the situation is quite different because we need to make sure that people talk to each other, because it just it might not happen, and when we do not talk to each other, when we do not see faces, when we do not hear voice at least, gradually we start like thinking about people on the other like end of the line. All these people in chat, they like doing some stupid things again. The manager provided really his crazy ideas and stupid tasks, and people gradually, without talking to each other, starting like think about each other in a bad way. And we need to make sure that everyone speak to each other, and everyone like has this feeling of the team, and everyone consider himself as a part of the team and see clear goals of the entire team, and do not work just specifically on his task, close it at home, and yeah, going to be more and more single and separate from the team. So we really need to make sure that team still works as a real team. Well, okay. I think that that's it, and I will not go further in some team communication because we already heard a lot in this topic.
We can dive in on our next webinar into that, but this was great, Vlad. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Vlad or any of our other speakers at this moment? Great. I think we've covered a lot of topics here, communicated a lot. You know, we saw certain themes that continue to pop up across the speakers, and no matter where you're at. Trust and communication, how vital they are to every aspect of moving your team from offline to online. From meeting in person to no longer being able to meet in person. You still need to be able to maintain motivation and that corporate culture, that sense of belonging to something, belonging to a team, belonging to a greater goal in what your business is trying to achieve. You need to set clear goals and expectations that they sound great to you, but you have to make sure that everybody on your team understands them. As Karen was talking about, what you say and how you say it is going to be perceived very differently by each person. What I'm saying to you might sound like this or sound like that. So communicating those clear expectations, those deliverables, those 30-day and 90-day goals, very, very important. Setting up the processes and procedures, and then the systems and platforms where do you even begin? We've covered some of those topics, but this presents a very interesting challenge. Not everybody can move from offline to online easily. Doing that digital transformation is very tricky, and much like anything else, it requires experts. And even those experts have their various skill sets and experiences that they're going to bring to play. And bringing in an expert right now is you're trying to figure out your digital transformation, trying to figure out what processes and procedures to put into place are very tricky, and are also very tricky depending on where your business is. Are you in an early stage where you're trying to figure out your business validation, your market validation, trying to create a minimally viable product, which is even more important, as we talked about, trying to slim down and get right to the point of what you're trying to do as a business, reducing costs, increasing efficiencies as you're online. But figuring out where your company is also changes some of these processes. Is your company going into survival mode, or you're able to maintain being able to drive innovation and look at strategic plans that you haven't had time to really work on, but now you have some more time, or you're in a different setup so you can think strategically, or are you just going into how do we keep this business going? How do we keep our employees working? And how do we keep our software development and our products continuing to evolve, continuing to change, and maybe continuing to adapt in an economy, in an environment that right now has drastically changed? Archer has been doing this for almost 20 years. We are a distributed team. We teach companies how to work with their distributed environments. We're able to come in and look at where you are in your organization, early stage, late stage, and bring those different experts into play to help you best set up your company for success. And I think that at the end of the day is really the most important. How do you set your company up for success with all of these very quick changes that came into play? Do you need a system analyst and a business analyst looking at what you're trying to do? Do you need a project manager driving that implementation, driving those processes? Do you need other specialists? And I think this is a great time to reach out to those third-party specialists that can really come in and help you maintain your business and your goals and your strategy. But again, all this comes down to trust and communication, and knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. And that's a very big common theme. If you can recognize your shortfalls and where your expertise ends, that gives you a great opportunity to go forth and find those experts, those consultants, those third-party partners who are going to come in with vested success in your company achieving their goals. And this is a time to go out and seek those experts to help you. Don't be hesitant about doing it. Jump into it. Embrace that there are experts and companies that do this day in and day out, like Archer, that can come in and immediately have an impact on your business, on your strategy, on your communications, on your revenue, on your costs, on the scaling of your business, and just maintaining a business at the end of the day. So I think this is a perfect environment to go forth and learn and talk to those people. And you have a lot of people like Archer. We're here to help our customers and help our prospects too. We're giving a little more of our time for free to help people really set themselves up for success. We're all in this together. Every country, every industry, every environment, every person needs to come together and help each other out. And I think we've given some great tips, some great best practices today. We've gone over a lot of great information. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Do not hesitate. Now is the time to ask more questions, not less.